Hello and welcome to the Labor John podcast. We're going to get right to the meat of it. My name is young Sam James, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Gabe Christie. And we have a very special episode today, don't we, Gabe?
We do indeed. We have a very special guest. If you would like to introduce yourself, Wade.
Wade Rathke. I've been with ACORN for 53 years, Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now. We work in about 15 countries. We organize membership groups of low to moderate income families, tenants, low-wage workers, whoever needs help in taking on issues and making something happen. And we worked in Philadelphia from about 1975-6 on. So glad to be here with you guys.
All right.
Fantastic. Yeah, I wanted to ask a couple questions. So first, I guess, if you can briefly go into how ACORN came to be.
I was... When you're 20, 21 years old, luckily you know everything. It's only as the years pile up you realize you're stupid as a brick. But I was working as a welfare rights organization. I started organizing. I dropped out of school up north of you to organize against the war. That was the Vietnam War, not some of the more recent wars y'all might be more familiar with. But
there have been a couple.
Yeah, we forever wars, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I got a job organizing for the Welfare Rights Organization, first in Springfield, Mass., and then moved to Boston, was head organizer of Mass Welfare Rights, and thought I knew how to do something a little bit different and better, not just welfare recipients, but the entire low to moderate income constituency. And I talked the director of Welfare Rights, Dr. George Wiley, into letting me open up an operation in Arkansas. He'd raised some money for a Southern strategy for welfare rights, but didn't have anybody willing to go there. Well, I went to high school in New Orleans, so I didn't hate the South. I was okay with going south. So June 18th of 1970, I showed up in Little Rock and began organizing ACORN at that point.
Wow. That's awesome.
21 years old, we got to jump on that sucker.
Yeah.
Wow. How was the scene in 1970 Arkansas?
Well, let's say this. We were organizing a multiracial organization of low-income people. So what did I know about Little Rock? I'd never been to Arkansas until I showed up to be an organizer. In the way that I was married briefly at 20 years old, and I was so unsure of it. My wife stayed in New Orleans the first couple of months because I wasn't sure what the heck would happen. But, you build a base, you follow your members, and, as I say, sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you just do the work. And we started. It was an unusual situation, but we believed in the arrogance of youth and the commitment that we had politically that if we could prove something like ACORN could work in a place like Arkansas, then, God, it would work anywhere. And maybe that turned out to be true. But you never know.
I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the squatting campaign that ACORN ran in Philly. I read your piece about the most recent campaign during the George Floyd uprising.
We love Philadelphia, and we opened the office there first around 77 or so. At that time, there was huge abandonment in Philadelphia. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but there still is. But it was a very simple campaign when we started, how to put people who needed houses with houses that needed people. And at that point, there were a lot because of white flight and economic change, there were people who sometimes you would pry open the door that might have been nailed shut or whatever, and you'd find a full set of furniture or whatever. A lot of these houses had defaulted on taxes, and because of the system in Philly, had gone to they were property of the Philadelphia city government, and didn't have a plan. They were just sitting on tens of thousands of houses. So particularly in North Philly and areas like that, where we had huge membership base, we started putting our people together, training them, opening up, busting through the front door, connecting water and lights, and waiting to see what would happen, protecting those squatters while they were in there, and demanding that the city set up a $1 a year program, which I'm sad to say. I mean, I have some people in Philadelphia working as organizers and staff with me now. That program doesn't exist now, but it did for decades, and a lot of people were able to get houses that way. The problem we found is that you could squat a house and try to do sweat equity, but some of the skills that go with making a house work are a little hard to go. And we ended up having to create the ACORN Housing Corporation. Loan counseling is still headquartered over on Broad Street in Philly. So there became other ways we could convince banks to give us the money so that people could get their houses. But squatting was what we did. We started in Philly and then took it to another 15 cities where we were organizing. Some as successful as Philly turned out to be, and some all you could do is get arrested and kicked out. You never knew.
Wow. Well, it's sad that we're still facing a lot of the same problems, but it's nice to know that there's at least been pressure against it this whole time.
There's a very good movie about called The Squatters, the Philadelphia Story. Director was Charles Koppelman, which tells the whole story of ACORN. We ended up setting up a tent city behind the White House for a while, a couple of years after we started the campaign, with all of our squatters, and won an act in Congress, a homesteading act, which gave people a right to take over these houses. We could never beat HUD. HUD would just arrest you the second you open the door. But where the houses were owned by cities like Philly or Fort Worth or New York or whatever, we were often able to fashion programs that help move houses to people. Love Philly. Love Philly. Great city.
Yeah, we did. We did an episode a while ago on the founding of the PHA, and that it.
Did you say the foundering of the PHA or the founding of the PHA?
Founding of the PHA.
That was my joke. Sorry about that. Because that's an agency that's been foundering for decades, my brother.
Yeah. It was floundering almost the moment it was founded.
That was a Freudian slip.
But it's interesting to see that even back then, basically the only reason the city government did anything was because NAACP and the Communist Party teamed up and said, there's going to be a revolution if you don't do this. And then was it Grace Kelly's father ended up advocating for it because he was running for mayor. And that's how we got it, for what limited good it has done.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's done nothing. I mean, without it, what would you have? More people without any place to go. But it had such potential, and still does, if there was really a housing policy and plan. But back in the days of Rizzo, when we first started this campaign, it was they used to have a whole division of the police department that dealt with civil disobedience. And let me tell you, it was all first name basis in Philly. First name basis. Hey, Wade. Hey, John. Hey, Fran. I mean, it was like that. I mean, I got stood up against every time I'd go to Philly. It seemed like I was stood up against a wall. We did a youth jobs campaign. 1,500 people marched on City Hall, stood up against the wall. It was like that. Philly's a great city.
Yeah, there's an in-joke between me and Gabe that we call Frank Rizzo, friend of the show, Frank Rizzo, because he turns up so many times.
Yeah.
Not always in the good light, but he turns up somehow.
Yeah. Even outside of office, he was still involved in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he's a bad penny that kept turning up. There's no question about it.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring us up a little bit more up to date, and wanted to ask you about the campaign against Comcast back in 2015. So I know there was one down both in New Orleans and then also one up in Philly.
we at Philadelphia, we worked with our old partners, Craig Robbins. It used to be ACORN, Pennsylvania. And we also pushed them hard in Little Rock and New Orleans, right? Comcast wanted to buy NBC Universal. For the FCC to approve the thing, they put Comcast through some hearings, and they promised that they would provide low-income families with $10 a month internet. That was the promise. Now, with Comcast, then you have to get them to actually do it. And there was really no implementation plan. They frequently, if you went on the internet to try to sign up or call them, they tried to upsell you to something that wasn't a $10 plan.
Yeah.
It was. We also fought them in Houston. So we went after them every way we could. We filed a complaint from all these cities with the FCC that they weren't complying, to try to hold up them getting a waiver to finally shut down the agreement they'd made. David, what's his name, who was big wig in City Hall for the mayor, who is the big, he was sort of a vice president of operations. What's that bum's name? I think they finally moved him out, but he'd have all these promises. He'd go down to the FCC. He'd talk to the politicians. He was the flack catcher for the CEO. And as soon as this show's over, I'll remember his name, but luckily I've repressed it. You know how you repress nightmares, bad dreams, abuse, whatever. I know his first name was David, and I corresponded with him at length. We negotiated with them in Philadelphia directly with...
was it Cohen?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He still probably tries to wave a big stick around Philly, but luckily he's been embarrassed and out of the news for the last couple of years.
You
get the great book about Philly where he was actually, a main character as if he was some kind of progressive. But boy, that turned out to be false, fake news. But anyway, Cohen kept promising, and we kept pushing. We did get the FCC to extend the agreement. But the real truth is that the FCC at that time was making this largely a voluntary program. We also tried to move a $10 program to other companies, Cox Cable down in the South and AT&T and whatever. Ironically, we've made a lot of headway with these companies on a $10 a month plan in Canada, which is totally run by three monopoly telephone companies. But with Rogers and Teleco and others, we have a pretty good high-speed, cheap $10 program in most of the country. But Comcast, I can't tell you how many we sat in. We did everything we could, but that's just not my favorite company. You've asked something. You're opening a wound now, Gabe. Now it's going to be a funny, friendly show. Damn.
You're preaching to the choir with Comcast.
Ask me about some other of our targets over the years, and it just will get hotter. But, Comcast, they just never did right. And then they built a building just like the first building and got all these subsidies. Is anybody in those buildings? It's the one place I hope remote work is working, because I'd like to see them lose their shirt on that building.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. See,
we might be able to in that building, Gabe. We might be able to squat there, and they might not know we were there. It might be on the 10th to 15th floor. It could be years before they find us.
I think that's the plan.
People after the show and see what we can do.
Well, got to make sure you start organizing before we release it, so you catch them unaware.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if they listen to your show. Let's hope so.
I will say from the outside, the one thing I do remember about the Comcast campaign was was it a 4 or 5 hour long public hearing where just about the whole city showed up to just complain? And that was fun to watch, but
and that was actually fun. I wasn't there, but Craig Robbins, who was working with us on that campaign, told me about it. We love that because nobody liked him. I mean, it was like dealing with banks in the Depression or yesterday. They just had managed to offend everybody, so they had no public support other than where the company made campaign contributions. And Cohen was good with that. Gave a lot of money to Democrats, a lot of money to Republicans, and no money to customers. And customer service, they couldn't really figure out how to spell that, and they certainly didn't know how to do it.
I don't think they can yet, so...
Yeah, they believe in customers, not service. It's a rough place to work.
So, did want to ask what organizing campaigns you're currently working on, if there's anything that you can be public about.
We work in about 15 countries now. A lot of our work has to do with, particularly because we're in Canada, we're in Ireland, we're in Scotland, we're in England, France, whatever. Like the U.S., people can't afford to rent anymore. There was strong public housing or social housing programs in these countries until Thatcher in the U.K. and here and there. And now there are few protections for private tenants. And so a lot of our work, we still organize multi-issue groups, but a lot of what the first issues that come up in the groups have to do with security of tenure, rent control, landlord licensing. These have been big campaigns for us, and we're expanding rapidly in that area. Netherlands, throughout. We've got people talking to us in New Zealand and Australia. You never know what's going to happen, but that's been a big campaign, and there are a number of others. Obviously, we organize low-wage workers, and we've talked to a lot of people who work in dollar stores recently. We caught hold of Mary Gunnell, who'd become a queen of TikTok once she started posting what it was like to work as a supervisor at Dollar General. And, we've got a big report coming out here on May Day about we got teamed up with some people and hit about 100 dollar stores in Atlanta. And, the conclusion isn't surprising, but it sucks for customers and it sucks for workers. I don't know if the dollar stores have proliferated in Philly, but they're everywhere. It seems like, unless you put a limit on them, one will open up across the store from the others. But we originally organized workers. We have a United Labor Unions had a local 862 in Philly. We organized a rag pickers factory there, and the number of the local was 862 because we won the election 86-2. Unfortunately, we also ended up on a strike because when they wouldn't make a deal, and the workers picketed the synagogue where the guy who owner was. It just was a mess, and we never got a contract there. We did get some contracts elsewhere in Philly, but when we merged with SEIU back in 1984. That local became part of their local 9 to 5, which was clerical, the 9 to 5 clerical local of SEIU's, and local 100 here, based in the South, remained 880 for home health care workers, and some other of the locals still were independent, but the Philadelphia operation went over to that local, and I don't know what happened after that. It's SEIU is a pretty big outfit, so I imagine they got kind of lost in the shuffle, but it was what it was, and our local stayed part of SEIU for 25 years, and we still are working on that. Whether it was we organized Walmart workers with SEIU, and 10, 15 years ago. So we've had some big campaigns, and I've got nothing but praise for them, but we're just not. We're a little bit too controversial for SEIU at this point.
Well, it's sometimes good to push the envelope. So
yeah,
and sometimes the envelope pushes back at you.
Yes,
very true.
I mean, we could call it paper cuts, but it hurts a little worse than that. But
yeah.
Well, rumor has it that you're going to be in town soon. I know you're on orders from, I think, David, whoever was putting us together, that you have some topics you need to hit on.
Well, we're definitely going to be in Philadelphia. ACORN stopped doing a lot of work in the U.S. around 2010. I left in 2008 and have largely been working with some projects here in the U.S., but a lot internationally, where our largest affiliates are in Canada and India. But we've been hearing more and more recently about people who are interested in how ACORN works and the fact that there's in some cases still a vacuum in terms of the work we used to do, whether it was voter registration or housing rights or living wage campaigns or whatever. So, we're going to do an introductory thing on community organizing ACORN style starting May 10th in Western Mass outside of Springfield, then Boston the next day, and then 2 days in Philly. We're going to be at the First Unitarian Church on Friday, May 12th, 7 p.m., Philly. And we'll be meeting with some other groups in Philadelphia on Saturday, and then over to D.C. and Baltimore, and then back home to New Orleans. So, we're going to see if we can spread the gospel and do a little evangelical work and see what people are really talking about out there and organizing. It's sometimes good to hear what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong and what people think we should do. And as long as they don't ask many trick questions, I think we'll do okay.
Well, I know you'll get a warm reception in Philly, at least, because the city's labor movement is definitely heating up recently. So,
well, I understand, there's been a lot of the Starbucks stuff and some of the other coffee chains have organized, and I'm meeting, while I'm there with some people who have been active in trying to organize inside Amazon plants. So we're doing a lot of work in East Delhi on a project with the Global Union Federation on an Amazon plant there. That's Delhi, India, not Delhi. I mean, I know there's some states, some delis here in the U.S., but it's a wider world out there, Sam and Gabe. And, sometimes you have to meet it head on. That's an interesting campaign. I was just there a couple of weeks ago, but they're also doing some great work, not just the Amazon Labor Union, but Amazonians United, if you're familiar with them. A lot of good, committed activists who've spent time organizing inside of it. I've enjoyed talking to them, and have a lot of praise for their commitment. And I think more and more they're focusing on a regional strategy. I mean, it's like when we went after Walmart. I mean, you have to get geographically tight with them. We focused on the I-4 corridor between Orlando and Tampa, St. Pete, when we did the campaign with the UFCW, SCIU, and the AFL-CIO and ACORN back 2005 to 2008. And that's how we got to India. In fact, the first time was trying to stop them from expanding in India. But I think as they focus more on plants that are close together, and they can get some traction that way. But 1,500, 1,200 factories or warehouses that Amazon has. I mean, none of us will live long enough to organize that way on NLRB elections. Kill me now. There's a way that they can, get enough strength inside and put those things together and put some real pressure on the company, and then see what might be able to happen.
Yeah. And especially, I mean, going the traditional route, when you have an Amazon warehouse every 6 to 10 miles, they can shut one down and not lose a day of profits.
I mean, they have specialized in redundancy. They have one warehouse after another. I mean, Walmart had 27 different kinds of warehouses. So if you could ever have focused on just the jewelry or just some of the specialty things, you could have cut the supply chain within the company. We didn't have the capacity when we were running the campaign. We were going on a strategy, a multi-point strategy, but the main part was stopping them from opening new superstores in that corridor. And we blocked 32 consecutive stores that they planned to do. We learned some stuff I'd never thought I'd find out it even existed, but we learned how to do geo-marketing like the retail boys do, and women, how they figure out where to put a big box store. We went to some folks in the business school at Tallahassee at the University of Florida. We got schooled in how to do that. We taught our researcher how to do it and read the book and called planning departments and city halls in 30 some counties every week to see what was going on around these corners. And as soon as they got ready to move on one of these locations, boom, we were all over them like white on rice. And, they tried to put it in swamps. I mean, they tried to put a big super center in a complex of $400,000 houses. I know $400,000 doesn't seem like a lot of house now, but 15, 20 years ago, that was a big house. And a lot of those people don't like a Walmart next door. But I think there's a way to beat these companies, but it's harder to beat Amazon just because they have specialized in redundancy. I mean, they could shut down one. I mean, you could watch the strikes that Verdi does in Germany every year for the last number of years, and Amazon just keeps on cooking. They'll take everybody out where they have them, and they'll still be able to make deliveries. It's rough.
Yep. Got to fight the fight where you can. So
fight where you have to.
Yeah. And we're happy to be on the sidelines and recording all of it as we go forward.
Well, we'll see what happens with these recordings, but it's all good. And, whatever way we can get the word out. But look, we're looking forward to being in Philly and on the East Coast. I mean, I'm based in New Orleans. I don't have the accent, was raised in the West until I got there. But I've spent time in the East and Boston, Springfield, and whatever. And obviously, ACORN had huge offices in Philly and New York and all over there. So I'm excited about the fact of seeing what organizing is happening these days, because I think there's got to be some new things going on. I mean, we go all over the world to find out what people are trying, what strategy and tactics is working. And I think I'm hoping to find that there's some innovative stuff going on the East Coast, because I haven't been out there on the ground, since certainly the pre-pandemic. But it's been a minute. 2000, I don't know, when I wrote a book called Nuts and Bolts, ACORN Fundamentals of Organizing. And I went to a number of cities, including Philadelphia at that point. Had a great crowd in Philly, old ACORN members and activists and who, union people. And but really, looking forward to listening to hear what people are doing and thinking.
Well, I think you'll be pleased coming back to Philly.
I do too. I know the tenants union is helping sponsor this thing we've got going at the Unitarian Church. And, look, the last time I was there, if you said the socialist response, you had to find somebody who'd say they were a socialist in order to say, but now we've got, the DSA has, their membership exploded thanks to Donald Trump was a super recruiter. He really helped build a lot of groups on the left, and DSA certainly saw their membership explode between their work with Bernie and Trump bringing the evil everywhere. So they're going to help sponsor it too, and looking forward to it. And some of the DSA people have been really part of the activist group that's really done the work inside Amazon. And hey, respect. Mm-hmm. Total respect.
Yeah.
There's a big debate over the last year. Was this a movement or a moment? And unfortunately, it's feeling more like a moment than a movement right now. I was very hopeful, all the stuff with Starbucks, all the stuff with Amazon. There seemed to be a lot of weird places all of a sudden embracing being a union. Gamers, for God's sakes. REI, co-op people. What the hell? But those numbers don't show up on the bottom line. I mean, we're still not getting through in some of the big employers that we need to really move the needle so that unions become something more than 1 out of 10 people who are paying dues.
That has been diving into labor history for the past 2 years. I think one of the most upsetting things is just seeing how much it took just to get to the 30% densities that we had in the 30s, and that we're we're already starting on the back foot trying to get back to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, we first started, ACORN helped found the United Labor Unions in 1980. And we didn't realize at the time, community organizers going into labor organizing, we just assumed all these unions had organizing departments. And now that we know more about labor history and have been inside the belly of the beast for the last, 40 odd years, you find out, oh my God, they shut down all their organizing departments by 1980. No wonder we had all of our members coming to meetings and saying, hey, we want a union over at blank, blank, blank. And we'd pick up the phone, we'd call the local labor council, trades council, and say, who covers hotels? Who covers, this kind of work or that kind of work? Mm-hmm. And, next meeting, we see the same person and they'd say, Wade or whoever the organizer, nope, nobody's answering my call. And finally, like fools, we jumped in where wise men fear to tread and created these independent unions at the time in what we thought were workplaces like home health care is where we had our biggest success. And that's been, over the last 30 years, has probably added 500,000 people, members to labor unions, SEIU, AFSCME, and many others. But it's not enough to turn the tide. I mean, you gotta do something very different in labor organizing for us to move this around. So hopefully people are taking it more seriously.
Yeah.
But don't get me started. I mean, unions get smaller, the dues gets less, and then you don't have enough money to run these campaigns. I mean, it's, I could tell you what the budget was on the Walmart campaign when I was running it, or the schools campaign when we ran to organize in school workers in Texas to have a union. And I don't know that I could get people to write those checks anymore like that. To all of a sudden put 30 organizers in the field within a couple of months. I mean, those are big campaigns. But recently I had a friend of mine, in fact, the same director who did the squatters called me and said, oh, he and another person, they wanted to make a film about innovative labor organizing now. And where should he go? Damn, I had to call him back. It's not like I had a list right off the top of my head saying, oh, these 3 places, go there, because you can't really send them to Starbucks because, they're stuck now. They're not, the new elections aren't coming. The bargaining is a piece of hell. You can't, Amazon labor unions caught in internal conflict now, and they've lost 2 and 1. I mean, where do you send them to show what the future is like? And I eventually bought a week at a time and I sent him a list, but you tell me. I mean, I'm glad to hear Philly's the place because, we need some place to show the way.
I'm certainly biased coming from a museum background, but AFSCME and Cultural Workers United work in the city has also been pretty impressive. They're now at the Museum of Art, the University of Pennsylvania Museum, and just recently at the Please Touch. Please Touch. And then Eastern State Penitentiary is steelworkers.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting to see the museum field going up, but talking about places where you'd never expect to see a union.
Well, and some people believe that where you see the largest growth in unions is in semi-white collar areas. So, but I'm afraid those aren't mass employers. I mean, we need to organize those places, Gabe. I mean, I salute it. That works fantastic and needs to be done. But if we keep falling lower and lower, and we're going towards 5% of the private sector now, you only can turn that around at some point if you have an effective strategy that's going to develop organization, whether it bargains or, can get certified in an NLRB election or not. You have to be able to organize some of these companies that have 10, 15, 20, 100, 150, 200,000, 500,000 workers in order to turn this around. And that's the problem we face. And as long as the labor movement is so fragmented around jurisdiction and, strategy around, NLRB style elections or whatever, it's very difficult to get that kind of traction to go after mass employers. But that's the big job ahead of us, or maybe ahead of you guys. I'm not sure. I'm still running as fast as my little legs can carry, but not sure if I'm going to be there for the victory. All we can do is try to get as far as we can get, but we definitely need some bodies, and that's a plural, to break the hard ground.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, if it was easy, someone would have done it already. So.
Yeah, maybe. Let's hope so. But we're going to be in Philly. I'm going to look forward to talking to you. We've got something we're calling ACORN Advocates, where we're also recruiting people to have these kind of conversations and support the organization and get involved in some of this talk about what would it take to do something different and bigger. And the more folks like you guys are in front of the microphone and talking to people and networking them together and maybe forcing them to do something different or think about something different, that's a good thing.